I don't trust him. And I don't want to be here anymore.
I want to go ahead and I want to move on to the next part of my stream, and that is my review for Don't Worry, Darling, which I already talked about on another platform on Double Toasted the other day in the Sunday service, but I kind of want to expand on my thoughts for this film, a film that is, probably more infamous because of its behind-the-scenes shenanigans, chat. With Olivia Wilde and Florence Pugh and Harry Styles and Shia LaBeouf and Chris Pine. I mean, let me just say, before, I go into my details about the film, well, my opinion on the movie, nothing that happened behind the scenes is affecting my overall personal opinion on this movie. I'm judging the movie based on its own merits, what I actually saw in the film and experienced, in the full 2 hours, right? I mean, it's crazy to think about, like, you had, on set shenanigans where they couldn't film on certain days because Olivia Wilde and Harry Styles were going at it, chat. They became lovers. It was frustrating to shoot. You had Olivia Wilde lying about the circumstances of Shia LaBeouf's departure. You had Styles just spitting on Chris Pine at premieres, like, what was going on? It's crazy, right? And so I'm not that none of my opinion on this movie is based on that stuff. If anything, I just find it amusing. And I feel sorry for the people who have to go through that bullshit. I mean, that really sucks, especially Florence Pugh, because she is one of the positive things I want to talk about. And listen, for those who don't know, because I even talked about the general premise, chat, it follows a 1950s housewife who is living with her husband in this seemingly experimental utopian neighborhood somewhere in the desert. Her life is seemingly perfect, but then strange, weird, disturbing things start happening to her over a period of time. And she realizes, there's a mystery afoot, and I have to solve it. That's the general, premise of the film. And listen, to start positive about this movie, to start on a positive, note, I think the movie has, is very impressive production design and costumes, chat. I mean, you get that sense, you get that immediately from even watching the trailers. The 1950 aesthetic is on full display, and it's shown off very, very well. The cinematography is also excellent. Like it's a well shot movie. In terms of the actors, I think Florence Pugh gives a very strong performance as the character of Alice, the housewife who is married to Harry Styles' character of Jack. And Chris Pine, not given as much development or depth as Florence Pugh's Alice, he also delivers a great performance based on what he's given, what he's able to work with, Chad. Like there are several scenes when Chris Pine and Florence Pugh, particularly one where they're kind of playing off of each other, going back and forth during this dinner segment. It's like this is quite good. There's some I have some issues with it because there's not a lot of depth. And they don't do a good job of explaining the mystery very well, but just the chemistry before them, between them was excellent. I would have loved more scenes with them because Chris Pine, when he's talking to other people, there's just not a lot there. It's not even the other actor's fault. It's just that the characters are not very developed. They're more like window dressing, and that's the thing about the movie. The problem is that the movie spends way too much time indulging in its own aesthetic. And it builds that unsatisfying mystery for nearly 90 minutes for an hour and a half before it actually reveals what's going on in this idyllic 1950s utopian community. And the thing is, the worst thing about it is that with the reveal, the twist, it really truly reveals that the movie's writing is awful. It's just laid bare. The entire narrative falls apart based on that twist when we finally learn what's actually happening. The film's second and third acts are just squished into the last 30 minutes. The second act, I would say, is 20 minutes, and the third act is just 10 minutes. And we're just going. We're going at a fucking a rocket's pace. Like, holy shit, here's all this information. There you go. Get going. Go, move. And it's like, okay, you're kind of overwhelmed, but also confused. And I feel like it's almost as if it's on purpose to avoid people thinking about the twist and the various narrative issues in this film. That's the only thing that I can think of. That's why they did all that, because they realized, like, oh shit, this doesn't make any sense anymore. And the thing, it really is the film script that makes this such a dumb and unsatisfying watch. They set up mysteries and clues, visual clues, only to abandon them later on in the film. And it just makes me think, it's like either this film was like heavily edited in post, or they added these things in because they thought they looked cool, or honestly, they just simply forgot about them. I don't know. I feel like, because funny enough, I was reading an article today, one of the actors in it, because, Florence Pugh is not the only person that has seen like weird shit in the movie, and she experienced like, she's being squished by like a plastic wall or something like that, or she's seeing like this random red airplane. There's this other character that is experiencing these same things as well, Margaret. I forget the actress's name, but she was actually talking about how the majority of her scenes, along with her co-star who was playing her husband in the film, and they're not in it very long, most of their stuff was cut from the movie. And so that's what made me go like, okay, so I think that there is a lot of movie that was on the editing room floor. I mean, that just feels that way, because there's just stuff that's missing that just don't even go back to. And the character motivations just don't make a lot of sense, or they're just not giving them time to develop the motivations. They are so obsessed with building that mystery and focusing on Florence Pugh, who is, again, doing a good job. She is giving a good performance, chat. There's no doubt. But they introduce other characters, and they kind of quickly forget about them, and they're in the background for the most part, and they bring them back to the third act, and they start doing stuff, and you have no idea why they just did what they did. It's like, what does that lead to? What was that based? And you just don't know. Oh, yes, the actor KiKi Layne. Thank you. That was the actress who plays, I think, the character of Margaret in the movie. Thank you. Oh, King DJ, thank you so much for subscribing. A pleasure to have you here. Reviewing Don't Worry, Darling. And again, it's like, I mean, there are other actors in this film, like Nick Kroll, and he's playing like one of the 1950s dads who's keeping secrets. And then we have Olivia Wilde, who's also starring in the film, as this character named Bunny, and she's keeping. It's like, and it's just over and over and over and over and over again. And even the mystery itself, Chad, which they spend so much time building up. It's like I feel like most people would get what's actually going on within the first 20 minutes. Hell, I mean, I feel like a lot of people figured out what was going on in the first trailer for this movie. And if that's the case, the thing is, if what they probably should have done, because that's what's so frustrating about this, when that twist happens and you realize what's actually happening in this film and how this is all unfolding, it's just not worth that first 90 minutes of the movie. But once you realize what's going on, it's like, okay, why didn't you just do that much, much earlier? Do that much earlier, and then you have more time to have more fun within the movie itself and set up some really cool, trippy, creative scenarios. I feel like that would have made more sense. But they apparently thought people would be too dumb to realize what's going on, even though I feel like it's very very obvious. In terms of the other performances, like Florence Pugh, I think, is great throughout the movie, even when certain things are revealed about her, what's going on with her. It's like, this doesn't make any sense, but she's doing the best she absolutely can. She's the one that comes out of this looking the best. And also Chris Pine. I think Chris Pine, again, he comes out looking very well in this movie. Again, there's no depth to his character at all. You're kind of given clues maybe as to who he is. All I'll say is like an inspiration allegedly was, I think Olivia Wilde said this, that he was inspired by Jordan Peterson. I'm like, I guess so. Maybe, but they don't do a lot with that. I feel like, okay, that's something interesting you could do. And it's like, maybe that stuff was cut. Again, it couldn't all be cut. Chris Pine's wife in the movie, played by Gemma Chan, she occasionally shows up, and she has a moment that's like, oh, that's shocking what happened with her character. But I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why did she do that thing? It doesn't make any sense. It comes out of fucking nowhere. It's like, oh, like my audience was just filled with all I'll say is a lot of teenage girls with their teenage boyfriends are watching this movie. They went, oh my God, they couldn't believe what happened. But I was like, oh, that was surprising. But I'm like, why did that happen? I want to do a spoiler section for this movie because all my problems have to do with the spoiler stuff. But go back to the actors, Gemma Chan, like, just wasted. So many of these other actors, none of them are doing a bad job. It's just they're okay. There's not a lot for them to do. And Harry Styles, which I know a lot of people have been hating on, his performance in this movie. And I don't think he's not bad. He's fine. He definitely does that whole thing where, if I'm going to show off like my acting abilities, I'm going to scream and shout a lot. And it's like, that doesn't really work for me personally. It almost feels like he's trying really hard to be like Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Revolutionary Road from a few years ago. That movie that Leonardo DiCaprio did with Kate Winslet. He kind of feels that way. But he's okay. He's fine. It's just, when you put him next to someone like, Florence Pugh. I mean, she's acting circles around him. But, there's nothing. He's not awful. I feel like people are saying he's the worst thing ever to ever happen to acting and in this movie. And it's like, that's because a lot of the bullshit that happened to him. And that allegedly is going on, behind the scenes and stuff. And I'm like, whatever. He was okay. It was okay. All the other actors who are not, all the other male actors who are not Chris Pine were all okay. Like, no one gives a bad performance. And but again, it's like when I'm watching 90 minutes of a movie where it's all about the mystery, but the mystery can be solved by, I think, a lot of audience members within 20 minutes, then it's like, why are you spending so much goddamn time on this? And it just makes me feel like they just didn't respect the audience's intelligence, or they thought they'd be too dumb to figure it out on their own. But then, like, the reveals happen, and it's like, okay, then you have more questions. And again, it goes back to my point where I think that when that's the reason why the second and third acts are so truncated within that last half hour, because they don't want to give people time to think, because maybe even they realize, like, oh shit, some of this doesn't make sense. Or the other part of it is they include a new medium in this movie, or they kind of, it's part of the plot. And I can tell that this film, again, the writers did a horrible job, but I can tell that this is being written by someone who doesn't understand a specific medium and how it works and how it functions and what needs to be in place for it to work. I mean, it's just, it's just not a lot of research. And that's frustrating as someone who indulges in that medium very often, nearly on a daily basis. So, yeah, it's just not a very good movie. I can appreciate it for its aesthetics. I can appreciate it for Florence Pugh and Chris Pine, but man, not for 2 hours. Not for 90 minutes where it's just nothing but mystery, and then a half hour that is just not really earned. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It's a bad film. To me, it's a bad film. Definitely one of the most disappointing movies of the year. The very definition of, I think, of a sophomore slump for someone like Olivia Wilde, who I think started very strong of something like Booksmart. It was a great movie. Came out the year 2019, one of the greatest years for film ever, certainly in my lifetime. But yeah, I gave my rating on DT. I think I said, some old bullshit. I don't know. I still maybe would go for like a very low rental, because Florence Pugh does do a good job. Chris Pine does do a good job. The movie does look very good. It's just that script is awful. It's awful, awful, awful. Maybe this could be on like my worst of list if I really do think about it, but for right now, I would give it an extraordinarily low rental. I do not think this is worth seeing in the theater. Do what you want to do. You want to see this movie, be my guest. Be like the Harry Styles fans, because, that's the thing, too. In the theater, when I went to see this movie, it was obvious. I went to see this at noon, and it was a Sunday. And so you just knew that, I was like, oh, these are all the teenagers who have, like, off from school, and all the girlfriends brought their boyfriends, forced them to go see this movie with them. And as soon as Harry Styles came on the scene, people going, ooh, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know if you're going to be doing that towards the end of the movie. And they still were! They still were. And all I'll say is I should have mentioned this yesterday about, how we go through the topics in the Sunday service, and we move on to certain things. There was one girl. Again, for those of you who've seen the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. She's like, he was just trying to be a good boyfriend. He just, he just lost his way, but he was trying to be a good boyfriend. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Stockholm Syndrome is real. That's all I'll say. That's all I'll say. But yeah, extraordinarily disappointing movie, Chad. But that's how I feel about Don't Worry, Darling. Feels like I should have a comment in there. Don't Worry, Darling. What about you guys? What did you think of the movie? Did you have the same issues that I did? Did you actually like the movie? Please let me know. I'm very curious. Very curious.